Remember Dr. Timothy Leary, the high priest of the flower children during the 1960s? This is an incredible story. He was a Harvard professor until he was fired for his research with LSD. Then he was convicted for possessing less than 1/2 ounce of marijuana and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His bail was set at $5 million, the highest in the history of the world. Leary was sentenced to maximum security with Charles Manson. After 29 prisons and a couple of escapes, he was recaptured in Afghanistan and returned home. Then he was paroled. Timothy Leary is now almost 60. He lives with his wife, Barbara, in Los Angeles.
I believe in freedom. I believe in young people. I believe in courage. I believe in making mistakes and taking responsibility for yourself. I can't lose. That's the tide of history. That's freedom.
Why do you think you were sent to prison?
Well, they said that I was the #1 enemy to the Judeo-Christian adult authority that was running the hive at the moment, namely J. Edgar Hoover, Spyro Agnew, remember him? Richard Nixon. You wonder why they put me in jail? The reason was, of course, that the Nixon administration had told the American people the #1 corrupting influence and danger to the American way of life is drugs. And he was absolutely right. Now, he couldn't do anything about it. The more he talked about drugs, the more billions of dollars he put into his army of narcs that went around the world bothering people, more and more people were taking drugs. So he had no successes to show, but if he could arrest what he and his colleagues thought was the spokesperson or the leading figures, that was a symbol of it. That's what I think. What do you think?
What was happening the night that Nixon resigned to you? Did you think there would be a great deal of change?
Well, we knew back, any sensible observer of the human situation knew in 1968 that it was going to be a reaction, that the adult authority, the older generation, was really angry that the young people refused to grow up and be like them. So Nixon and Reagan were both elected on the campaign of crush the kids, stop the dissent in the colleges. We all know that. So it was inevitable that you have that reaction, and it was also inevitable that that kind of reaction wouldn't hold, because basically the American people don't want a government of spies and wiretapping. We don't want a government that's drafting our kids and sending them off. We don't want a government of narcotics agents busting into middle-class people's houses. Everything about that was against the American way of life. We knew that reaction would happen. We knew that it would end, and we knew that time is on my side.
I'm just going to throw out a few subjects if you'd care to respond.
Well, television now is in the hands of the adult establishment, and television is 99% dedicated to keep you dumb and stupid. Occasionally programs like this get through. The family is going to be is always going to be part of the future, but perhaps less than 10% will be domesticated family people in the future. LSD is one of the most important discoveries that the human being ever made. It's the key to changing your own brain. Now, there's perhaps 1 out of 1,000, maybe 1 out of 10,000 people who are mature enough and self-confident enough to be able to use this. Particularly back in the 60s, at the height of the Judeo-Christian empire, when we were sending good Christians over to Vietnam and so forth, LSD was a very powerful revolutionary device, giving people control of their own brains. But I've never advocated it. You can't advocate the telescope. You can't advocate the microscope. You can't advocate nuclear fusion. Before the 1960s, there was no notion of pleasure. You worked 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and on Saturday nights you were allowed to get drunk and bump up and down your wife for reproductive purposes, maybe. There was no notion of pleasure. Pleasure was something that was owned by the priests and the big guys in the sky. Well, you know, for every little pleasure there's a pain, pain, pain. That's what they taught us back then. Well, now pleasure is our #1 business. So don't tell me that nothing happened in the 60s. The 60s have taken over. By pleasure, I mean self-indulgence, self-actualizing, recreation, recreational vehicles, going and coming where you want to, private airplanes, waterbeds, all this new sensuality, the new emphasis on aesthetics, Joe Namath with a hairdryer in the locker room. The key to religion, the key to find God is intelligence. It's not obedience. It's not submission. It's not falling on your knees. What's wrong with you falling on your knees? Do you worship a God that wants you on your knees like slaves? The new religions are going to glorify intelligence because God wants us to be intelligent. Because the smarter we are, the more we'll understand her handiwork and the glories of the galaxies that she's built. So definitely, the new religion is going to be a religion of intelligence. If you increase your intelligence, you're sexier. If you increase your intelligence, you're more romantic. If you increase your intelligence, you're more religious, because obviously, the smarter you are, the more you want to know exactly who did it, who created us, and how she wants us to evolve. People are much smarter today. The very fact that I'm saying these things on a regional television is a sign of sophistication and growth. People couldn't say this 10 years ago, and people are listening. A third of the people that listen to this broadcast are going to think it over and are going to take some steps in self-actualization and throwing out the 2,000 or 3,000-year-old heritage of submission and fear and guilt and sin and devil and all that nonsense, which is designed to keep you stupid and to keep you frightened. A cult is simply a small version of what in larger extent becomes the sacred holy cow. Christianity was a cult. One time there were 12 kind of hippy-dippy fishermen following Christ. Was it a cult then? The Roman Empire and the Jewish Sanhedrin thought Christianity was a cult. Anyone that invites you to follow a leader is asking you to submit, to go on your knees. Don't follow any leaders. Cults, if you mean by cult, a religious group following a charismatic leader, giving money and obedience and submission, well, I'm totally opposed to that. I hate followers. I've never had any followers. But what I've done throughout my history, anytime someone wants to follow me, I do everything possible to alienate them. When the vegetarians come around, I eat meat. when the Buddhists come around, we open up champagne, don't we, Barbara? When the druggies come around, we tell them they're taking too much drugs. Leave us alone. We don't want followers around. Death is through. Death is the final stupidity. Death is the only enemy of life, and within 5 or 10 years, if we gave the emotional and the political and the economic backing, our scientists would give us a pill that would wipe out death. Are you ready for that? The interesting thing is that a lot of American people want to die. And if you tell them, you don't have to die, they get mad. I've given lectures and say, you know, you don't have to die. And people say, what do you mean? You can't say that. That's what life's all about, death. Yeah, that's what they told you in the old Bibles. But that's no longer an option. If you want to die, go ahead. We're not going to pass laws to put you in jail if you want to die. We'll give you wonderful, wonderful, glorious ceremonial funerals. But the option is there. If you don't want to die, you don't have to walk blindfolded backward into the future that the Judeo-Christian religion gives you of death. You can live as long as you want in these bodies. It's time again, I think, after the 60s, a little waiting period, for people to start speaking up again and shocking people. I want to shock people that are listening to this. I want to make you think. I want to get you arguing among yourselves in your own living room the way you used to do in the 60s. I want the kids to be arguing with their grown-ups. Avoid terminal adulthood, young people who are watching this. Don't grow up like your parents. Argue about it. Let's get some sparks and electricity going again, because they're all a little too laid back. It's time to, it's a great American tradition of speaking up and challenging and stirring things up, because no change takes place in the brain unless there's shock. Unless there's some sort of an electrical explosion that shakes you up a little. It's not going to hurt you either. To hear a different point of view is not going to bring down the the walls of the Mormon temple or the local churches.
Timothy Leary gets along today by giving campus lectures, and he's just finished his 24th book. He's not interested in leading the drug culture, but he is interested in leading mankind into new frontiers and freedoms in outer space. We'll be back after this. Next week, we'll take you to breakfast at K and Red's, and we'll tell you all about the man behind the scenes at Newswatch 2. Have yourself a nice weekend. Good night.
Well, Dragon State.
Why?
Like to.
Why?
It's fun.
Why?
You pick up boys.
What are you doing on State Street?
Hey, we're looking for broads like them.